Hi, my name is Phoebe. I am a third year physicist. Because I'm doing the BA instead of the MPhys degree, I'm doing the 3-year, so this is my final year. I would say a typical day for me in non-pandemic times would look like lectures from around 9 to 12, sometimes to 1 p.m. And then after that I would go and get some lunch. Then typically I use the afternoons to do work for tutorials, essentially homework. Normally I will end up just working in the afternoons, and then I have dinner, and then I have the time after dinner in the evening to do some stuff with the societies I'm involved with, or social activities with friends and the like. Sometimes if I'm in a crunch period for a deadline, or if it's a particularly challenging piece of work, I will need to work after dinner, but I try to keep that time free. I end up doing a bit of work on the weekends as well, but Sunday in particular I try to keep free. I think one of the things I enjoy most about university life, particularly coming from school in my first year, although it takes time to find the balance, once you figure out the balance between all the different things that you've got going on in your university life, there can be a lot more freedom than you would get at school to decide what you want to do with your time. And I really enjoyed that because I was able to set my own amounts of time that I wanted to dedicate towards doing work for university, as well as for doing extracurricular stuff, so like the societies I'm involved with, as well as different musical activities. So I didn't actually pick CATS as my college, I chose Keeble. The reason that I chose Keeble, choosing colleges can be quite challenging. I think one of the big reasons that I chose to apply to Keeble College initially was it's very close to the physics department at Keeble. It's like, I think the physics department is essentially across the road, so you could sort of, in theory, roll out of bed and go straight to lectures within about 5 minutes. Ultimately, I ended up at CATS. I'm really happy that I ended up at CATS. I think CATS was a really good fit for me. And I sort of saw that from day one. I think a lot of the kinds of words that people would use to describe CATS would be very friendly, welcoming, an open environment. I think that really does ring true. I did kind of see that from day one at CATS. And yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm biased, but I think CATS is a very lovely and welcoming college. The student accommodation at CATS is very nice also, in that there are different rooms and there are areas of the college that you will be in depending on what year of your degree you're in. And unlike other colleges as well, one of the nice things about CATS accommodation is the rooms are in different places. Some of them will be facing into the quads of a central area, where students and staff will be walking around and moving to different parts of college. Some other areas will be facing green areas or the forest or the river or something like that. But you don't get charged differently based on what room you end up in. Likewise, if you end up with, in your first year, an ensuite versus not an ensuite, it's not very common to get an ensuite in your first year. They're basically reserved for people who have what are called welfare requirements. So if you have a disability, you end up needing ensuite accommodation, then you can end up getting that, but you won't be charged extra for it. And that's a principle that carries across, which I really like. In terms of my thoughts on the CATS library, I really like CATS library. I know CATS is often criticised a lot by especially people from other colleges for its architecture, and the library is no exception to that criticism, but I think personally CATS architecture is really beautiful. I think the library is really good. It's very spacious. The library has all of the texts that you'll need in your first year, certainly. In later years you might need to go to subject specialist libraries, but I found everything I needed in there. My first year it was very easy to navigate, and it's a lovely place to study as well. Very close by, so you don't necessarily have to leave the college like you would if you were going to university libraries. Yeah, so I'm a third year doing physics. I think, so the tutorials are different based on the subject, and the most drastic difference is between the kind of non-essay science subjects and the essay subjects, or I guess science and maths. So for mathematical science tutorials, so for instance physics tutorials, and I imagine students doing subjects like chemistry, material science, engineering probably have similar experiences. Typically you'll do what's called a problem set, which is, it depends on the subject. It can have anywhere between sort of 5 to 10 questions, and you might think from your experience at school, oh, that's not a lot of work, but these sorts of questions will tend to have, they'll take a lot longer than the typical questions you might answer in school. They are quite maths heavy as well. That's one of the big differences between university physics and school physics, is the amount of maths you do at university. But you'll do all of that. You end up, I think, for physics, on average, having 2 hours of tutorials a week. So a tutorial is normally an hour, and you'll have done that set of problems, small number of questions, but quite long questions. And you will give that to the tutor in advance. They will then mark it, and then you'll get your marked work back either like a little bit before or at the tutorial. And the tutorial is then to talk about the work. The tutor will highlight any questions that are particularly important. So they might say, for instance, for the exam at the end of the year, this question is very likely to come up. It's a very important part of this course. Or they might say, this question allows us to discuss this topic in a bit broader detail and go perhaps a little bit off syllabus. That's the nice thing about the tutorials, as well as, you're talking with leading academics in their field. And a lot of the time they will be, maybe not as much in the first year, because for first year for physics, the topics are quite generalised. So most tutors will have experience enough to teach most of them. But particularly in the second year and afterwards, you'll end up meeting with a specialist who's actively researching in the field that course is in. So you can have very interesting discussions kind of beyond just the content of the problem sets. But they will also use the time to go over misunderstandings that people had or questions that they found difficult, stuff like that. And it's really valuable time. As I mentioned, so there will be smaller groups as well than probably you're used to at school. So I think, you'll typically, for physics, end up being in a group of either a pair or a group of 3. And it's very nice having that small staff to student ratio for contact with your tutors. I think my favourite lecture course so far over the whole of my degree would probably have to be our second year electromagnetism course. Obviously, it's been my experience of lectures, particularly in my third year, has been changed by the pandemic and lectures being online. But when lectures were in person, the second year electromagnetism course, as I had it, was very good. The lecturer, for one, was highly engaging. He was very good at presenting the material in a very engaging way. He was very good at pacing his lectures as well. So there were moments where he would maybe crack a joke. And he would also always have a break in the middle of a lecture, not for people to go and get a cup of coffee, but where he would talk about some of the important figures in this course or in the lecture. So if, for instance, I don't know, he'd been talking about Maxwell's equations, then he would spend sort of 10 minutes in the middle of the lecture talking about James Clerk Maxwell. Who was he? What other stuff did he do? And a bit about his life and stuff like that. So related to the content, but it was nice to have that bit of a breather in the middle of the lectures, and that's something that was quite unique to his lecturing style. He, as I said, also paced the lectures very well, and I think electromagnetism is a very important part of physics. It's a nice part of physics as well, because it's one that you are introduced to at A-level. A lot of this course is kind of fleshing out building upon what a lot of us will have learned at A-level. I really enjoyed the content, and I thought the lecturer was exceptional, so that would have to be my favourite lecture course.